Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of you, the people you work with, and the people you do life with. At the time of this recording, I'm offering all of you, yes, my lovely listeners, a free 15-minute communication coaching call. You come with some kind of communication problem, and I give you a solution. My calendar link is in the show notes, so check that out. Joe Davis is at a point in his career when he is just willing to give. And that's what he did here today with me. And I'm really excited for you to hear this because it's not as much of a tactical, I guess, episode as it is more me trying to draw out the wisdom and the gold from somebody who has lived a life of consulting and building and talking and strategizing and listening. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. And I'm just really grateful. Very pleasant, very, very easy to talk to. Joe is that kind of person. And let me read a little bit of his bio here. Joe served as MD and senior partner at BCG. In The Generous Leader, that's his book that we're going to talk about a little bit, Joe shares a performance review. He was told he was not the best at problem solving solo, but with others, he could solve any challenge. His manager identified his key strength, which was a person who could connect. So Joe spent 37 years at BCG. He co-founded the Washington, D.C. office. He led office systems, started BCG's North America public sector business, led BCG North America, founded and chaired BCG Center for Inclusion and Equity. Joe served his BA, earned his BA from Whitman College, MBA from HBS. Joe is currently serving his second term as Whitman's board chair. Joe has been married to Sarah for 40 years, has 4 children, 8 grandchildren, with number 9 on the way. And he gets to spend a ton of time with him, he told me, which is so fun. So glad for Joe. All right, so here we go, y'all. I hope y'all enjoy this interview. I know I did. It was a really, really good interview. Thanks, everybody. Joe, welcome to the show. I didn't rhyme on purpose. It just happened that way.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's trying to think of a rhyme back, but it's great to be here. Let me keep it simple.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, yeah, it's good. It's good to meet with you. And I'm always excited to talk to people at your stage of life and career because you've been there, you've done that. You have so much to share. And before the show, we were talking about Arthur Brooks' book, From Strength to Strength, and just that idea. And I was actually at a conference yesterday, and I was talking on multi-generational workforce development at this conference, and I was speaking, and I was talking about the shift from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence, right? And that whole concept. What did you think about when you were reading about that in that book?
Well, it's interesting. Well, so let me just say I'm 67, 35 plus years of BCG, 8 grandchildren. So I am on that other stage, although I feel quite young, just like that book would point out, And it makes you think a lot because you're sitting there, go, go, go. And I'm not arguing, don't be go, go, go in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. However, you do think, you actually have wisdom or crystallized intelligence that's different and actually is still quite valued. When I've been speaking with some of my old colleagues and saying, hey, I'm here if anyone wants to coach, I'm surprised the number of people, hey, I'll be happy to speak with you, half hour to an hour a month. So I actually think that's quite rational level thinking about it. And actually, it's like me, my stage in life, it gives you, I shouldn't say gives you hope, but thinks, okay, there is another whole chapter here that one can deliver on. Now that sounds, we're not here to talk all about someone in the last legs, but I could see it. Now, if you asked me to read that when I was 35, I wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I might intellectually get it, but I wouldn't know what you're talking about.
Right. And I think that's why I bring it up so often is because, when we're in that fluid intelligence stage of our lives, we're just kind of like, you just think you'll be there forever. But
Yes.
it's not until you actually hit the downslope of the fluid intelligence and get up into the crystal, that realm where you start to like mourn yourself a little bit and mourn your career and mourn the fact that you're not as good or as fast or as intelligent as you were, or not necessarily intelligent, but like, all those things, like you start mourning it instead of embracing this stage and where
Well, yeah.
you
Or
are,
hopefully you don't mourn it. Now, a lot of people, I don't think. I mean, I don't think you even notice it until sometimes. Oh my God, I haven't written the book on that stage in life, but I think a lot of people don't even feel it. And the next thing they know, it's like, wait a minute, what happened to what I was doing? I'm not doing
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say there, as we talk about the early stages, the other thing I thought was interesting, and it's going to sound a little weird, but what did you do? What's at the end of it? What is the material goods or things that are the hard item, practical things that are left, and what is someone going to say at your eulogy? And you don't want to talk about that, but that was in this book. It said actually you should be thinking about, which is you call legacy too. You should be thinking about what are people going to be saying about me one day, and that they're not going to say he has a fancy house. They ain't going to give a crap. I mean, now I'm going to say what everybody knows. They're not going to say he had a nice car. If he has great kids, he or she, they'll comment on that. They'll comment on, but they probably will comment on what they remember you did for them somewhere along the way, which is worth thinking about, even if you're 30. I believe.
It is. It is. I'll do an exercise with leaders or teams or whatnot. And I did this more as with teams early on as a brand strategist, working with teams and their understanding what their brand was, what their value was, and writing the team's eulogy. Like, what if you weren't
Oh,
around
that
anymore? What would the world be missing out on if you weren't there anymore? What would they say about you if you weren't here anymore? Like if your whole team died, like not like personally, but like if the team went away,
yeah, the thing
team
disappeared.
goes
Well,
away, right? What would they say? But now I do cater that towards leaders, and say, what would we be missing? Yeah. So you're great at spreadsheets. So you're good at building a process, right? Like, that's a thing, but what's the impact you're going to have on
right.
people long term? And are they going to talk about you 20 years later as, oh man, Joe was that person that like totally poured into me. That he pushed me hard, but he was also there to like support me and build me up. Or was it going to be like Joe was? Yeah, I remember that guy. Like So it's kind of funny to think about
Well,
sometimes.
it's funny the way you said that. I had a mentor and a friend who was that guy in the sense that he poured into you, but he poured into you hard. And a lot of people like, oh my God, but he really wanted you to be better. And it was sometimes tough, or always tough. But you don't, and I remember a lot of people were grumpy about it. Oh, this is Steve's name, but they talked about him forever, because he cared about everything improving, including all the people as part of it. Even if it was, tough love along the way, if you want to call it that. So it
That's
is
right.
what, yeah, people will talk about what you did for them. Um,
Long way into the future. Long
yeah,
way.
right. We
Hey,
got, we got into a funny place here.
yeah, here, okay. Let's pivot a little bit but I want to tie it in to this idea of generosity. Because you wrote the book A Generous Leader, and it's been out for a year now, at the recording of this show. But I want to get your take on that. Do you think it's easier to be generous when we're talking about stages of life? Do you think it's easier to be generous at a later stage of your career than it is an earlier stage of your career?
Yeah, well, so let me just define what I mean by generous leadership, which it's just what we've been talking about. I actually think someone really focuses on being a generous leader, they are giving of themselves freely without expectation of personal gain, so others develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential. Exactly what you and I just said. And the thing that's but now I will also make sure we're very clear. It isn't just being nice. I mean, as a leader, you have to get results. If you don't get results, you ain't going to have the job anymore. Either you're going to lose the job you have, you're not going to get promoted into one, or you won't get promoted up. So this is still about delivering. It's just that it understands you deliver through your people. Now, to your question, it's very interesting because I talked to a bunch of people for the book, less senior, more senior. And yes, it's easier as you get more senior, but I don't know if it is because of seniority. It is because you have no choice. I mean, if you're a new manager, 30 years old, three people working for you, and they screw up, you probably can do the work yourself overnight, a couple of nights, you have to pull an all-nighter and deliver. Once you have 20 people, you can't do that anymore. Now it's all about those people, hitting on full cylinders. And then to your point, when you are very senior, you're running a company, which not many of us fortunate, get to do that. But then, you can't do anything with all those 100,000 people if it's a big, other than set direction, inspire, motivate. I mean, you do a lot of external stuff. So I think I don't know that it's necessarily easier. I don't agree with that. I think it's just, you realize you have no choice other than to grow to help your people grow. And maybe it's easier in your own head because you're more mature, you have that understanding. But I don't see any reason why a 30-year-old can't think, okay, my job is to take my 5 people that work with me on my team and make them damn good. A 30-year-old can do that. There's
They
nothing that says they can't do that.
100% can. No, I agree too. I was just curious, and I didn't even think about it right until I started talking to you and thinking about, I, I'm my perspective, and maybe this is just me. So let me just talk about me, right? But I feel like this happens with a lot of people earlier on in our career, especially when you come right out of college and you're in there, those first building years of your career. It's all about my job, my pay, my benefits, my work, the thing that I'm doing, my awards, my thing, so that I can start building credibility. I can start building my resume to be something bigger. Like, I don't expect to get paid a ton of money. Well, maybe young generations do now, but I don't expect to get paid a ton of money right out of school, right? I know I have to work for it. I know I have to grind. I know I have to do my thing. And so it's really self-centered type focus at the beginning. And I'm just going to say it's kind of the way it is. Like, we're just out of school. We need a job. We need to build a family. We need to build an established thing. And then when you get later on in life, maybe you're not focused so much on that because you have the stuff for the most part. And so I'm just wondering if it's easier to.
Well, I agree with you, but might even think, if you just think in the context of a person who wants to grow into leadership in whatever organization they're in, when they first start there, people do look at them and how they delivered. They don't look at how the people all around them, unless they were so toxic, and then you get fired. But they do. It is all around. What did you do? How did you deliver? What's your development? Are you growing? You're right. The trick is, okay, now we promote you, and then your brain's got to start shifting. I'll tell you a story. When I was my first job out of college, I was Procter & Gamble, sales rep, then got promoted to sales manager. I was 24, 25 years old. I can't remember. And I had sales reps, career sales reps. One was 42, 36. I thought they were ancient. No, they weren't, but I thought they were. I would ride with them every 2 weeks and never give any feedback. One, because I was scared. It was all about me. I didn't know who I was to tell them what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I had a very, wonderful lesson. I was doing the year in review for this one guy, Rich, and I wrote down everything he needed to do that I'd seen over the year. And I launched in with a list, and about 90 seconds in, he says, "What the blank, Joe? You ride with me every 2 weeks and you've never said any of this? What the heck have you been doing?" It was very eye-opening to me, because it was all about me. And in his mind, wait, buddy, you're now the manager. It's about you helping me get better, even if you're 24 and I'm 32 or 42. Now, we could all be so lucky as to have. And then when I walked out of that room, my boss said, "Don't you dare ever write a review where anything written on that piece of paper they haven't seen or heard from you somewhere over the course of the year." It was a very powerful lesson at 25 years old. But it's just indicative to your point. For a while, it was all about how I delivered. And no one really told me, no, Joe, you don't get any more. Now it's about how they deliver, because you're managing them, and this team's got to deliver. So all of that to say, I agree with you, but somewhere you all have to make the shift if you really want to be, a productive leader.
Yeah. I think that's really good. You lay out, the book centers around this idea of vulnerability and being open and whatnot. When did you stumble upon that idea? Because you're just reflecting back on your story. It was hard for you to be vulnerable as a young leader, imposter syndrome, whatever was happening at that point in time. Right. When did that dawn on you, as far as something that you feel is critical for leadership or just people in general?
Well, I mean, this all I can sort of answer that but it's all evolution, right? Nothing just like there wasn't. But when I look back, I can kind of reflect on it. I do remember when I finally was running, not finally, when I was leading the Washington D.C. office for BCG. So I was probably 40, and I was quite open and emotional up in front when I had a staff meeting. We'd have staff meetings once a, and the reinforcement. I mean, I might even if something was really intensely emotional, I would tear up. I'm a tear up kind of guy, um, and but the positive reinforcement was amazing. People come, it's so good you're so honest. It's so good you're so open. My God, it's freeing for there was this reinforcement that was a positive thing, not like what's the hell wrong with you. And they knew. I mean, I still let the people go that needed to let go. They weren't going to cut it. We grew the business. The job was to grow the business, all that. So that's when I started to notice, when you're being more honest. And then I'm also a very blunt and direct guy, which, especially in feedback, which you could also say is a vulnerability. A lot of people don't want to give blunt feedback because they don't want to be, like criticized that they were harsh and all that. But there, people would give me, thank you so much for telling me directly. I see what I need to do, as opposed to this mushy feedback. I got positive reinforcement. Now, if you indulge me for 1 minute, the thing that's interesting is I actually, as I reflected back on the question you asked over just even while I was writing that book, I cried through my wedding vows when I was 23. I was petrified. What guy cried? A 23-year-old guy. My wife was clear as a bell. We've been married 43 years now. But it was funny. I didn't realize it, but afterwards people came, oh, that was such a wonderful ceremony, and the emotion in the room and the love I could feel. And I didn't register in my mind that my crying made that difference. And then my mom died when I was 30. You can imagine what happened in the service. I cried. This time I didn't get a word out. And the priest said, well, Joe, that's okay. For tears are the fountains of love. And the same reinforcement came. So I didn't know at those moments but I do believe that those things were growing for me, the understanding that sharing who you are actually inspires and motivates people. And then, as I just said, as I got more into business and actually, I get feedback. Hey, thank you for being honest and direct and showing your feelings. And that's when it started to really click. Now, the good news is I never used it, because you could also just turn it off and on when you need. It could become a cynical thing, but that's not the nature of someone who really is, really cares. But
well, my goal is to get you to cry on this show.
On this show, that'd be really hard. That'd be really hard.
We don't do that too much on this show.
No. I also got coaching. Don't cry quite so much. Figure out how to.
Your coach don't cry so much. Well, I totally feel you, man, because I was, sitting there with my wife and I was sobbing. I don't know what's going on. I couldn't I couldn't hold it together. And she's like looking at me all weird. She's like, dude, are you all right? It's just like, I don't know what's going on with me. I can't stop. I don't cry that often, but when I do, it's like, it was the birth of both of my kids and then my wedding. And my wife, all those times, right? Of course, during the birth, she's like, oh, this is horrible. Like,
what do you do?
And then you're just crying over, so it's just like, I totally feel you, man.
I bet you $1 million she appreciates that so much.
She probably does. I want to talk about this idea, though, of this generous idea, because you go through 7 kind of principles in here in the book. You talk about generous communication, generous listening, generous inclusion, the generous ally, generous development, generous moments, and then this give up the mask idea, which talks about vulnerability and authenticity. What's your favorite one? I want to know, which one's your favorite?
Yeah. Oh my! I have 3 favorites.
Okay.
I will pick. I just think the generous listening is my favorite, because it is so essential to humanity. You could look at our country right now. It's essential to leaders, essential to each other, and that really, by that, I mean, listening to what the other person is saying and what's in their head and why are they saying what they're saying? Where are they coming from? What's their lived experience? You want to use that word, and trying to understand that really and putting it together with what you think, and not presuming, I know it all. Now, a lot is driven by the consulting world. You're trying to, help motivate and move clients. And if you don't know what's in their head, well, you obviously, I mean, you can arrogantly think you have the right answer, but it's not going to move anybody to behave differently if you don't understand where they're coming from. So I just think this whole other concept of really listening to learn, listening to what does the other person know that I don't know, and when I put the two together, how can we get to a better place? And I just think that is my favorite. It's critical in business. I mean, if we think about life, while there's many of us that don't agree with each other, whichever side of whatever you're on, if we at least try to understand why does this person think that so adamantly and I think this so adamantly. I mean, we have rational reasons for it. We may think we're both crazy, but at least listen to the other side and then choose to engage in something. We can't even get that far. So I think that's critical and very important. Now I got to couple that with this vulnerability because you can't be a good listener if you're not humble enough to understand I don't know everything. And if you don't know everything, then you have to be a little bit vulnerable if you think you've got all the answers. So I think that when we could talk longer about that, but I just think this whole idea of vulnerability as it ties to listening. And then if you want to be a leader, I mean, you probably had leaders who thought they were perfect, behaved perfectly, but you knew damn well they weren't. So immediately it's like, what's going on with this person? They can't be that perfect. Or you figure you couldn't match them. Or more importantly, like if they're pretending they're that perfect, what are they hiding? Just all of a sudden you aren't really connecting. And then the last thing, when I say three, I just small acts, big impact. They're so simple and easy. I mean, this is, remember the star on your piece of paper or homework when you're in kindergarten. That was a big bloody deal. It meant nothing to anybody except to you. It meant a lot because you tried. And I just, how many stories you heard where a boss sends an email to the person who does a hell of a job, maybe copying their boss or copying the team, and you feel so good. You feel so good. I was talking to a person the other day who said he got feedback in his company every single year, and all he got was, "Hey, you did a fine job. Here's your bonus." 3 years in a row. And no one ever told him anything. He was so frustrating. Finally, he said, "I need a career advisor who will give me feedback." And then the fourth year, he started got feedback, and he was so happy. So he got good bonuses. That didn't mean anything to him. He was waiting for someone to say, "You're performing well here. You're not performing well there." So this whole simple concept of small acts, big impact, recognizing somebody. I'll tell one story, if I may. Scott Kirby, CEO of United, after George Floyd murder, he called. Well, his wife was on a plane. Story here. His wife was on a plane, and the captain came out and said, "Oh, Mrs. Kirby, I'm so excited to see you. I love your husband, as our CEO." She said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, when after the George Floyd murder, he called," and this was a black female captain. He called every captain of color at United and just checked in. And he didn't have advice for us. He just wanted to check in and see how we're doing and let us know that United and he are here. Now, that's maybe a little bit bigger than a small act, but it was pretty small. Just he had to have someone organized, find them all and get them phone numbers. But just a couple-minute call, and this woman was devoted to United forever for that simple call. And so, I just think this, also ties kind of to what I could skim into your book. These small things all the time, and they can add up to great, to very positive outcomes.
I always say it's the millions little micro moments that are going to define your brand over time. It's generally not the big momentous occasions, right? It's just the little acts over time that are going to build or destroy that brand over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right. Let me say that. I mean, if I look back over years of me or colleagues, I don't remember the guys that got elected CEO of BCG who are my best friends. I don't think of them as, if I think very fondly, it's not the CEO role. It's the stuff they did up to getting it and while they were in the role. And that's what mattered.
It is. You spoke for a minute about this idea of humility in the context of vulnerability. I've never thought about those together. I mean,
Well,
so keep talking to me about that. Like this, when did you make, how's that connected in your brain?
Well, no, you're right. Because people think vulnerability, they think, oh, you're going to show your weaknesses. You're going to say, last night I had a terrible night because my kids were, I'll tell you, I asked a friend, what are your vulnerable moments? He said, well, Joe, I hate to admit I don't know something. And he's a leader at BCG. He said, if I'm working with a team and I can tell they're getting stuck and I don't know the answer either, if they turn to me, I will leave the room before I will say I don't know. Because he didn't want to show the vulnerability that he didn't know everything in front of the team. And well, of course, that's utter waste of time. The team's stuck. And so he said, one day I realized this is just silly. So I stayed in the room and said, well, everybody, I don't know either. And he said it was unbelievable, like this burst of energy. Oh, you don't know? We don't know? So all of a sudden the creative juices were unlocked because the fact that he expressed the simple fear of I'm stuck too unstuck them. They could say, okay, it's okay to be stuck. And now we move past it. So I think that, I think that's what you meant, but it's not all about what someone might first think when you hear the word vulnerable. It's all about being human, not always having all the answers, but understanding your role is to help everybody get to the best answer. I once was at a conference, and Alex Skorsky, who was previous CEO of J&J, said it's your role as leader is not to have the best answer in the room, it's to get the best answer out of the room, which is another version of vulnerability or humbleness. Oh, you mean I don't have to be in here and know it? I just have to make sure all of them. Now, if you know the best answer, you might have to guide people to it. That's a different thing. Sometimes you do. Right. I'm not saying you don't always know the best answer.
Right. I love that. Getting the best answer out of the room. Because
isn't that a great quote?
Because it's so good. Because I was thinking about this idea, and oftentimes, especially young leaders, and maybe you've heard the same thing. They're coming into a new role, or they step in, and the imposter syndrome's coming in, and they feel like they have to have all the answers.
Yes.
They're like, but what if I don't know this? And what if they ask me this and I'll look incompetent? And they'll wonder why I'm even in this role in the first place. And did they make a mistake? And that's their self-preservation coming out. But them sitting there thinking about this idea of, I got to have all, and I said, your job isn't necessarily to have all the answers. Like, do you really think you're going to have every answer for that engineer and that marketing person and that sales development person and that accountant? And like, really? Like, it's a little bit of a high bar, man. Your job as a leader is to either coach them into like getting the answer out of them, right? Which is what you just said. How do I get the best answer out of the room? Or removing obstacles so that they can find the best answer for themselves.
Or they / all of you can together. I know you went, no, of course, what you said. My brother-in-law was a CEO of a company. He said, Joe, but we were trained to never say, I don't know as a kid. I said, yeah, but Brad, I remember a point, at least for me, where someone said, the best thing to say if you don't know the answer is, I don't know. Because you're going to get caught one or the other. You're going to get caught if you're lying. You're going to get caught if you're bullshitting. If you just crumble and don't get all wishy-washy, well, then, but hey, I don't know right now. I'll find out. Who doesn't like that? Look in your eye. I don't know right now, but I'll find out. Any manager or leader loves to hear that from their team. If they don't know, now maybe they'd want them to know. So somehow this whole you got to know everything is horrible disservice to whoever gets trained into it.
It is.
No offense, but it really is bad.
And you know what? With I think with younger generations coming up, they expect you not to know everything. And then when you act like you know everything, they automatically see you as inauthentic. As like, so I think that's part of it too.
And I think one thing I don't know if it's changed because maybe people 40, 50 years ago wish they could see humanness from their company bosses, but they didn't. You remember the old, Jack Welch, that top, you better be in the top bottom side, fire all of you, boom, boom, boom. Or, IBM, everyone was a cog in the wheel. No offense to IBM, it's a great company, but white shirt, blue suits, did your job, came, that is not what people expect now. I mean, social media changed it. It just put a lot of pressures and exposure on people, and then COVID put it over the edge. But people want to see humanity. They need to see humanity in their leaders. Google did a study that I came across somewhere, Project Oxygen, they called it. Mm-hmm. They interviewed 80,000 of their managers and said, what makes the best managers? Clearly it says how big Google is, doesn't it? But the best managers were good coaches. What made them good coaches? They engaged their teams. And how they engaged them? They asked and they listened. They asked and they listened. So if you knew everything, you wouldn't be asking questions and listening over and over and over. But that was the number one trait of those who got the best results and the team members thought was the best leader.
Have you ever been involved with a company that is that has that culture, even like a mechanism somehow of asking and listening? Like whether it's I don't know, a Dropbox in the front office, or if it's like some kind of digital solution, or whether it's part of their review process monthly with one-on-ones, or I don't know. Like,
Well, I think I'm just blanking. What's Ray Dalio's company? I'm just blanking. The Bridgewater,
oh yeah,
the hardcore, hedge fund private equity firm. Um, I interviewed one interview with them at one point. My wife said, "Hey, I'm not moving to New York, so you can keep interviewing, but you might as well stop." But they had they had very much reputation. You better be listening, honest time, all of it. And I think it was an extreme. I think the company I would highlight, which, but it's giant, but it was true, is when Satya Nadella took over Microsoft. Microsoft had been the opposite of that. I mean, under Bill Gates, it was just technology. Then, of course, Steve, I just blanked his last name. It was just a hard ass, but Steve Ballmer. But Satya turned everything to, I want a more of an ask and listen, a humble, we don't know, learning culture. And he single-handedly, now, he just kept it going down and down. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of individuals in that place that don't behave that way. It's a giant company. But that was a culture that he put in there. And you saw the turnaround in Microsoft pretty dramatically, as well as bringing in, he was a technical genius and had the insight that the cloud is where the money is. I mean, there's other things he was, but he fundamentally changed the culture to more of that type of culture.
I feel, and being in the space that we're in with leadership and consulting and culture development and communication, and it is a lot of the soft stuff. And I have people on the show that talk about, there's Stephen Faber wrote, love is just damn good business, and that idea of love and talking and saying the love word at work, and how do we do those things, but talk about generosity and authenticity, and we talk about these things quite often. I don't ever have, I'm not gonna say ever, I don't necessarily have people on this show that are like hard driven, fast. This is how we lead. We build this system, build this system, build this system, build this system, and then you're a successful leader. Like we don't talk about that like on this show. And so I don't know. It's kind of this thing that I think gets undervalued, but we talk about it. We appreciate it inside of our cultures when it's there, because we notice
Right,
when it's not, for sure.
right. No, you're right. No, it's interesting. I did have someone it was a year ago. I was talking to BCG office. Someone raised me. I have a question for you, Joe. You were always known to be a real hard ass. So when did that change? And what changed? No. I always cared about results. Every office I ran, any business I ran, we got results. And I was very focused on that. And if people didn't cut it at BCG, I let them go. But I consider that to be a very caring thing. I mean, if you're not making it, you got to go work somewhere else because you don't want to be stuck. I mean, so I said, the problem is you didn't hear me ever talk, just the same thing you're saying. I believe all the time I cared about growing the team. That was what was in my head. Now I've talked about the results, but I knew in my behaviors that it was all about ensuring everybody's humming. If everyone's humming, the thing works, unless you have not adequate people. That's a different problem. But you're right. We don't talk about that. You set some metrics, you hit the numbers. I did have some feedback once. I moved to the West Coast to run the West Coast of BCG, and it is whatever, it doesn't matter. But it went from so-so performance to exceptional performance. Very lucky. And now did a lot of things that make it happen. But my feedback from at the end of the year, they said, "Well, Joe, it's really great." They, us, but I have to step out of the room when it's my turn. But they said it's really great because you're performing well, and the West Coast performing well. But what we really noticed is all the individuals, their game all just lifted, which is which is your point. It's not just that the processes are brought in place, or the way we invest, or the way we sold, or the way we focus, but everyone lifted their game through development, training, and motivation. And that's what I got the feedback. And I was actually quite pleased my own firm realized that's what made the difference. It wasn't anything else, but it's lifting everybody's game.
That's really smart. I mean, and it leads me to this idea of where I kind of want to like wrap this up with this idea of, you've been there, you've kind of done the things in your life that have led you to this point in your life, and you feel like you've had a successful career, I'm assuming, and you feel like you've made an impact in people's lives, and what I want to know from you is, What is that thing you would recommend or advice you would give at this point in your life, in this crystallized intelligence brilliance that you have, that would apply to a leader today listening to the show?
Yeah, I think if I try to put that simply, I think if you never forget you have to get results, I will say that. But if you look at your team and your people, don't call them your people, the people who work with you, and understand they are humans, they are human beings, they have aspirations. They're like that young guy of you that you talked about. They have goals, they have things they need to do differently. And if you focus on understanding they're humans and helping them to be at their best, you are going to perform well. It's just going to happen. But you've got to help them perform at their best, and that might take harsh feedback sometimes. I mean, honest, not brutal, but harsh feedback. It'll take positive reinforcement other times. I mean, it's the balance of things. But that's, if you look at that team and say they're a group of humans that my job is to motivate, inspire, you're going to win. I don't want to call it winning, but you're going to win.
We all want to win.
Yeah, I know.
We all want to win.
You're going to do very well, and your organization will do well, etc. I think that's the thing to remember. I mean, that's what people didn't think about 50 years ago. And I think the people, your teams, expect that nowadays. As you said, it's just, for a lot of reasons, the world's changed.
What causes leaders to not look at the people they work with as humans?
Well, a couple of things. First off, they're always in a hurry. They don't think they have time to even stop and think about that, which I notice is something you argue. Secondly, they're too arrogant and think, I got all the answers and I just push these people around to get there. Third, fear. Oh, you mean I have to connect with them as Skot Waldron, not as some podcast guy? I have to see Skot as a person? Ooh, that's a big ask. That one's trickier. those are times legitimate excuse. Think you know it all is a mistake. And just fear of having to figure out how to really connect with people is something you'll learn.
That's so cool. There's something you said to me at the beginning of the show before we started recording as kind of something you wanted to do. And if you don't mind, I'd like to quote it. You said you want to increase the depth of your sincerity as you go doing interviews and as you go connect with people in life and whatnot. And that, I think, having that realization or that focus in your life right now is so amazing. I think it's a really good example for all of us of how we can too think about how sincere are we being in our leadership, how sincere are we being with our kids and our families and the people that we interact with every day. I think that's a big deal, man. So I love that.
Thank you, Skot. Thank you. Yep.
So keep crushing it, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
I'll do my best.
You're not done yet, Joe. You're not done.
I know. I'm not quitting.
Keep up the good work. I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing your thoughts. And I wish you the best, man.
Thank you.
Seems like you have a lot to give, so keep giving.
Thank you very much.
A generous leader. And I was really intrigued. I was interested. Is it easier to be generous when we're older or younger? We know that, 1, 2, 3-year-olds aren't necessarily that generous. They don't necessarily know what it means. It's a very egocentric time of life and our biology and how we grow up. And I don't know. I was interested. That was an interesting segment that we talked through there. But what does being generous mean? A giving of yourself freely without the expectation of personal gain. I like to think that the show is generous, but I know I get personal gain out of it all the time. So I don't know if I'm being that generous. It's something that I think we all are constantly working on. This quote, I don't really know how it fits in, but I loved it. Tears are the fountains of love. Like, hello, super cool. I love that. So all of you out there that are criers, there you go. Fountains of love all the time. Generous listening. And I hear about this quite a bit. And I hear leaders and critique from leaders that say, or from people that are talking about their leaders, that they hear what I say, but I don't think they're listening. So that's something interesting too. I hear they hear me, but they're not truly listening. And people feel that. And so I want to know, are you truly listening? Are you being a generous listener? And if you are, kudos. If you're not, there's opportunity for you to grow and help people feel valued, heard, and understood in ways that makes them want to be part of the organization, wants them to engage, wants them to stay motivated. So keep working on it. Thanks, Joe, for being on the show. If you want to find out more information about me or check out the show notes where there's going to be more information and links to the things referenced in this episode, visit skotwaldron.com. And lastly, I'm asking for a little bit of love, just a little bit. So please take a moment, follow, rate the show. The algorithms like that. It helps me get the word out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And until next time, stay unlocked.